Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I'm Creative Katie, and I will be your creative guide. Today, I'm going to create an art journal page where I'm going to take a rice paper that I didn't like the color scheme of, and I am going to transform it and make it my own. Now, the rice paper, here it is, came from NINNYSNAPKINS.com. It's their own series, and I will link them down below. Love the girl. Don't want to do all the orange and yellows. Hence, I'm going to change it. But let's create a background. Now, I'm going to create a background, and this is inspired by the scrapbook pad from Stamperia. And I recently made a video where I talked about how to maximize the use of those scrapbook pads. You may want to check it out. I'll link that. So this background, I am using unbleached titanium, white gesso on the background. I have gessoed the page beforehand, and that allows the paint to blend wet on wet a little bit easier. Then I'm putting just a wisp of turquoise or teal in the background, ever so lightly. And I'm applying all of this with my makeup sponge, which is my preferred way or most common way of getting color onto the background. I want this cloud-like, kind of ethereal, very light. And then I'm going to duplicate the patterns that I see in the background from that Stamperia pad. I love what those artists do, how they put colors together, and I'm just learning from them and trying to duplicate. So that's a good thing to do. So I just keep working my way. This is a 9 by 12 Canson mixed media art journal page. I take it off the coil because I love working flat and it prevents me from getting a mess on pages that are done or on future pages. And admittedly, I'm a messy crafter. So I'm just adding this, trying to, again, duplicate the feel of what was in the scrapbook pad. Just adding more. I don't need it to be exactly what it is. So now we have some music notes in the background. I have a stencil from the Crafter's Workshop that has music notes. So I'm using a stencil brush and some, I believe it's Naples yellow paint. And I'm just going to add some of these music notes here and there on my background. Now, I admit this background was actually created long before the rest of this page. It was created when I did the, get the bang for your buck video. And it's been sitting on my desktop for a while till I found the right focal image. It's funny how things work together. So even if you have a background and you're not sure what the next step is, just leave it there. Inspiration will come at some point in time. So here I'm just taking a little bit of the unbleached titanium and going on top and just kind of knocking it back. This is another stencil from the Crafter's Workshop, and I am stenciling with the teal. Again, that swirl motif is on the Stamperia page that I'm trying to duplicate. If you have a stamp image that's a swirl, a stencil, it could be the same size or scale, could be lighter, or it could be bigger, could be smaller. But I wanted some swirls. Putting swirls on your background gives it some movement. So again, this is fairly dark. So I am going to knock that back with an application of unbleached titanium. Now again, I'm going back. There's some script on the background. So I grabbed one of my script stamps, another basic music stencil or stamp, swirl stencil or stamp, script stencil or stamp. All those things are that good basics. So if you're a beginner, those are things to look for and add to your stash. You'll get a lot of use of them. And I believe I used brown here. So we have teal, ivory, um, yellow gold. So here I've just got a little bit of unbleached titanium and I'm knocking back. I want this more subtle, more cloud-like. I don't want to see that as up front. So I'm just pushing it back and doing a wash of color or white, or doing what I'm doing with the makeup sponge and just lightly knocking it back. So there is the finished one. Now I decided I'm going to grunge it up, and I got some brown paint on my brayer and I'm just brayering ever so lightly on top. Now the page isn't exactly flat. It's a little buckled because I've put some mediums on it, and this is working really well to grunge it up. And quite honestly, I think this is the first time I've used the brayer brayering on paint in this way at this stage of an art journal page. But it won't be the last because I really like the effect. But you got to use a very light hand. So you can practice off the page first if you're a little worried about making it, putting too much paint. I'm just adding a little bit more, grunging it up. It's very vintage-like, this background. So here we are. These are the Autumn Girls that I got from Ninny's Napkins, and it's their own rice paper collection created by Ninny's. So you can go and check those out. They give them this size and smaller. Now, I don't want all the background there. So I'm going to use a water brush or a brush with water, and I'm going to water cut out just the girl. That's all I'm interested in. Now, that excess, there's a lot of rice paper there. I am not throwing that out. In fact, I made another video, and I will link it, where I use those leftovers to create with. So again, I'm maximizing the cost of the rice paper and using all of it. Nothing's going to go to waste. So I have the other girls there, and I sat in a session and I cut out all the girls. Now these are beautiful, but I don't necessarily want all autumn girls. But I can't draw. I need to rely on other people's focal images for faces, which I love incorporating into my art journal pages. So this is the way I can do that. And this was the challenge for me, was to take this and change it up. Get rid of the color scheme that they give you and make it your own. So it was a bit of an experiment. I wasn't exactly sure how it was all going to come together, but like the sentiment that I used on here, be afraid and do it anyways, because that's how you learn. So here I'm adding water with my brush. Now, when you use for rice paper water cutting, you need a bigger brush and more water than you do if you were water cutting with a napkin. Napkin, you need very, very little water and a tiny little liner brush. Now, the reason we're water cutting it instead of cutting it with scissors is because you want that deckled edge. And that deckled edge, that frayed edge, disappears more readily into the background, so you don't see it. So again, those scraps, I show you how I use them in this video, so you can go and look for that one. So I think I'm going to put the girl on the left-hand side, and I'm loving how right now the colors of what she's wearing match perfectly for the background. And I did think, oh, why don't I just leave it alone? But I said, nope, this is the challenge. Now, if I glued the girl down, the background, anything that's dark in the background, like those teal swirls, are going to come through in the middle of her face. And that's not a look I want. So I flip the girl over and I am applying a coat of gesso. Now I'm not globbing it on. I'm being very careful, kind of dry brushing and building up layers as I go. I'm afraid that if I put too much at one time, it's going to seep through. So I'm kind of looking, but it doesn't seep through, and absolutely nothing. So I would say, kind of dry brush it. put a couple layers if you want it more opaque as opposed to really globbing it on. This works really, really well. And when I glued it down in the next step, it didn't really impact or change how well it glued down. Rice paper works really well for focal points, focal images, because it's pretty sturdy. You can maneuver it, manipulate it. It's not going to rip, or tear easily. So here I'm just gluing this down with fluid matte medium. I'm putting a coat underneath, and then I'm going to put a coat on top of the girl. And I'm putting it on top, again, to make sure I have good adhesion, but also I want to seal that rice paper because my plan is to transform it, to change the colors, to overpaint. So I want to make it into a non-porous surface. You can glue this down with clear gesso and put a coat of clear gesso on top as well. It will do this pretty much the same thing as the fluid matte medium. So my girl is glued on. Everything is perfectly dry at this point. And now I'm taking a deep breath and I'm going to overpaint. Now I'm not sure how much I'm going to overpaint and how much I'm going to transform it at this point. So I'm starting with the dress or the body of the dress. She's got a bit of a lace collar there. I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to paint this teal. And I chose teal for this one because I have that teal swirl in the background and I want everything to work together. If I had coral, I could do this in a coral color or magenta or blue or green if that's what I want. And with the other autumn girls over time, that's what I plan on doing. I'm going to change up the colors, change up the focal image, and make it my own. We are the artists. I want to do more than just glue this down. I want to have fun and explore, create my own background. So I put a coat of gesso on there because I wanted to white out the orange that was there. And then I'm coming in with the teal blue-green color. And what I've done here is I've taken my paints and I've mixed a couple paints to get a shade that I like. And I kind of did that off camera. I think I show this coming up, but I've taken, 2 or 3 colors and I mix them up kind of wet on wet together to get a shade that I like. And there, see, I've swatched it out and, some is a little more blue, some is a little more green. I mix the two together to get the perfect color. So there I'm just painting the bodice of the dress. Pretty easy. Coat of gesso to block off what was underneath, and then the chosen color. Not sure what I'm going to do with that lace collar, if I'm going to leave it brown, but I know I want the band of the hat to match the dress. So a coat of gesso, and then a coat of that teal mixed paint that I've had. And when I'm painting here, I like using an angle brush. I find that it gets into the nooks and crannies and in an easy way. So once that's dry, here are the two colors I said I mixed. But again, if you're doing this, you're picking your color. Maybe you're going to do light blue permanent. Maybe you're going to do quinacridone magenta or purple. And again, I wasn't sure if I was going to leave the hat brown or not. And then I decided, you know what? The goal is to transform this. So transform it. And I said, what goes with teal? And I thought, oh, you know what? My Prussian blue, it's kind of a navy, would look good. It's dark. Now here, you'll notice I did not gesso it because I wanted the darks and the lights that were already there on the hat to come through. The Prussian blue is slightly translucent. And so some of those shading that the artist had put in comes through, even though I'm putting a coat of this navy Prussian blue color. And again, I wasn't 100% sure that this was the right choice. Deep breath, move ahead. There are kind of shadows and lights um, in the hat that, you know, kind of mark the underneath of the hat and the brim of the hat. And I'm kind of paying attention to where those things are because I want to be able to put those in afterwards. But at this stage, I'm thinking, you know what? I rather like what's going on here. And then the collar. I thought I could make it white and keep it, make it look lacy, but I thought, no, I'm just going to keep going with that navy. I like how that girl is looking. I like how everything's come together. And yes, when I've overpainted this lace collar, I'm losing some of the detail, but I'm going to put some of that in using stencils. Right now, it's just everything is painted. It's maybe a couple tones of color, but it's rather flat. Well, now that the girl is in place, I have some empty spots, so I'm going to add to my background. Remember, when I made this background, it was a couple weeks ago. I didn't know where my focal image was going. I didn't even know the orientation of the page. So now I'm just going to add some swirls in, um, just to make everything work together as I'm seeing it on this day. So again, I'm using my stencil brush. I have the teal paint that I painted on that girl to transform her. And I'm just adding some swirls in places that are now missing. And then they're too bright. So again, like I did when I made the background, I'm just using a little of the unbleached titanium and just knocking back those swirls so they're not so bold. And this is where we're at. We've got the background and the girl, and I'm quite happy. But let's add some detail. There were dots on that band, so I flipped through my stencils and found a dot. You can use a stamp as well, using my stencil brush and a little bit of unbleached titanium mixed with white gesso because it's kind of vintage. I didn't want stark white. I thought that would just not work with the background that I have. So I'm just stenciling and we've added some details to that. That just livens it up. And you can use any motif that you want from any stencil. Here I had one that kind of resembled the lacy collar, so I'm stenciling on the collar part. Remember, I lost a lot of that detail, but by stenciling, I've added it back. Later, I'm going to come and do the dress. I wasn't sure. Now, the cheeks were very much orange tone because remember, it was an autumn girl. And I wanted to kind of move away from that. So I'm using some quinacridone magenta with white gesso. They're very rosy here. And I do add some white gesso to it and just soften that color on her cheeks. And it reads more pink than it does orange now. And I just thought that looked better with what my girl is now. And you're also going to see both of them later on. Now, I wanted some of those dots that were in the hat to be in the background. So again, I used the unbleached titanium with white gesso, and I'm putting some dots in there and all through the background. It's very subtle. I don't even know if you can see it. The thing I would do different here, I might have done this with modeling paste, and that would have added some texture and another layer of interest to my background. Now I'm going to shade my girl. So here I'm using the Prussian blue, which is the blue for the hat, and I'm shading the dress and that band. And I'm thinking this is enough. Spoiler alert, I come back and shade with black, but often I don't know I don't want to go too dark. So here, I'm just shading the collar. This softens those hard edges, melds, any imperfections that you have, the shading, it makes the eye not see it anymore. And a necessary step. I do have a video where I teach this shading technique if you're interested. It's a good one to learn because you will use it on every single page. So here I'm coming in with now black and I'm shading on the outside of the girl to make her stand out from that background. Soften those edges. Add some highlights, low lights. And then I'm going to edge my page. Again with black. Just frames the page. This is all part of that finishing process. I'm quite happy with my girl at this stage of the game. I'm happy with the background. They work together. I've met the challenge of transforming rice paper. Here I'm adding some highlights as well with a little bit of white gesso, just to make sure, you can see the under part of the hat and the brim. Then I decided I wanted to add a little bit of detail on the dress. I used just a shade darker than what was there. Very tone on tone. I didn't want it in your face, but I wanted a little bit of patterning on the bodice of the dress. And it was another stencil from the Crafter's Workshop. Now the eyes were brown and I decided I wanted to make them teal. So a little bit of gesso and a little bit of that teal with a light hand, and I've painted the eyes teal. And once I'm done painting, I grab my stylus and dot the center of the eyes. Again, the lips were more orangey, so I wanted to make them more magenta. So I watered down my paint and painted the lips a little bit more pink. Grab my liner brush, thinned out some black paint, and I'm painting the wisps of the hair. Kind of following what was there and maybe adding a few wisps of my own. I thought about I could make her hair longer and cascade down below. That's a challenge for another day. Because you can change everything. You can change the colors, you can change the hair, the lips, the background. I wanted to put some of that Prussian blue into the background. I tried stenciling, that didn't work, and so I just decided to splatter a little bit of that into the background. And that made me happy and satisfied. Everything. So there was the girl at the beginning, the autumn girl, and there she is now. There's the transformation. I am happy with how this turned out, and I definitely will be doing the same with some of the other autumn girls that I have in my stash. I grabbed my courage sentiment pack and I picked the sentiment, be afraid and do it anyways, because that's my message to you. Sometimes trying a new technique, trying something seems like, what if I wreck it? Well, what if it turns out? Take the risk. It's always worth it. So I'm gluing this down with my fluid matte medium, and then I'm shading around it just to bring it out a little bit, soften the edges. I'm heating up the painter's tape. It's been on there a while, and I don't want it to rip the paper, and so that's a way to remove tape that's been there. Now, my sentiment seemed a little bit too stark white, so I'm giving it a wash of the unbleached titanium and then patting it off. This just kind of pushes it back, makes it less stark. So there is the finished page. Again, I love how it turned out. I'm happy I took the challenge. I hope I've encouraged you to take some rice papers, transform them, make them your own. Be afraid and do it anyways. Until next time, go get creative.